Hello there, how's it going? I hope you're having an amazing Thursday, and I'm so happy you found your way to the sketch session, whether you're watching it live with me right now or whether you're finding this later on in the week. I'm so happy you found your way here. I usually have my other computer on the left so I can check if I'm actually live, so I don't have that today, so fingers crossed that everything is good. Let me introduce myself if you're here for the very first time. My name is Carolyn Peters and I'm the owner of Kira Studios, which is where I teach classical drawing skills to artists who want to have a very solid footing to explore their creative voice from. And every week I offer these live sketch sessions where I provide a subject matter for us to draw from, and I also, in sync with that, give you a lesson to focus on. And like that, I'm trying to make the perfect blend between what you would get from a gym, like a gym for drawing, like a place where you can work out and where you can strengthen your craft, and at the same time also the benefits of a playground, some place where you go to let loose and to just enjoy just the act of drawing. And I always encourage you to choose, what do you need today? Do you need to work hard, or do you need to play around a little bit and just not take yourself too seriously? And I do hope that you're ready to work hard, because as you probably already saw in the title, tonight we are focusing on the P word, which is perspective. So our subject matter, we rotate weekly, right? So we go from figure to portrait to animals, and then the last big category is inanimate things. So our inanimate things tonight are presents. And I figured, the holidays are coming. It's a nice way to slip some really hard work into our sketching practice. And so I wanted to focus on perspective. Hello, Chris, good to see you. And I'm fully prepared to do this all by myself, because I know that not everybody is dying to practice perspective, but it's so good for us, especially if you're interested in drawing animals, if you're interested in drawing people. It's not that we look like boxes, or that animals look like boxes, or that a house necessarily is all that much of a simple box. But once you understand how you can fit things like that inside of a box, it's much easier to tackle those more complex subject matters. So as I said, we're going to focus on presence, and with that I'll teach on how to wrap your head around perspective. So with that, I'm going to break the lessons down in the beginning, and then I'll switch into some reference material, and I have timed them for about 5 to 7 minutes per image. And we start very simple, and they kind of ramp up the intensity. So I hope you're ready for that. So perspective. What is that P word? Basically, artists over the years have realized, hey, sometimes stuff looks really weird. Like if you see something like this straight on, it looks recognizable, looks fine, looks just like a rectangular piece of paper. But sometimes stuff looks really weird. If you see like this, it doesn't look like itself anymore. Or when you see something circular, here it looks like a full circle, and all of a sudden you see it differently, and it doesn't really look like a full circle anymore. So that distortion is what artists have tried to figure out. How do we represent that easily or effectively? Not that easily, I won't lie, but how do we do it effectively? And so that's what perspective attempts to do. And I think where artists get tripped up is we get confused with how to tackle this. Like, what do I need to address first? And what questions do I need to answer? So I'm going to give you those questions, and you can write them down, and you can literally just follow them in order, and you can break down any box. So here's the thing. When we try to translate perspective, we're kind of playing a game. We're playing a game where we pretend that we walk around the world with a frame that we're looking through. You call this our picture plane or picture frame. And this picture frame is perpendicular to our line of sight. So if I lift my head up, the frame goes with me. If I look down, the frame goes with me. It's always perpendicular to my line of sight. Now that's going to be important, because the first thing, once a box enters the room, the first thing you have to answer is, do I need to use, and here comes some big words. Do I need to use a 1-point perspective system to represent this box? Or do I need to use a 2-point or a 3-point perspective system? Now, what the heck is that? Let me explain it. It's not that difficult. Remember I was saying we were walking with this imaginary frame in this perspective game we're playing? Just pretend that the edge of your screen is your frame right now. If I hold the box up like this, let me twist it just so. Notice how both my vertical lines and my horizontal lines are perfectly parallel with your frame, like with your computer screen frame, which is your picture plane. If that is the case, you'll have to treat your box in a 1-point perspective system. Don't worry, I'll show you all of this, what that means when we draw, but I need to get the information out first, okay? Now, if you're facing a box like this, notice what has changed. We don't have 2 sets of angles anymore that are parallel with your frame. You see, like here we got both the horizontals and the verticals be parallel to your picture plane. Now, I only have my verticals being parallel to your imaginary picture frame. Only those verticals are parallel to the edges of your frame. If that is the case, you see how these here, they're not parallel anymore, they're now at an angle. When that is the case, that is your cue that you need to use a 2-point system. And then sometimes it even goes like this, and you don't have any lines parallel with your imaginary picture plane anymore. See, these are now at an angle, these are now at an angle, these are now at an angle. So that's when you need the 3-point system. Okay, so that's the first thing. Now, remember what I did earlier? Where did it go? I was holding up my rectangular piece of paper. When I hold it up like this, it looks just like a rectangle. But when I do this, the main difference that happens is that the edge that's closer to you appears longer than the edge that's further away from you. And what happens is if we were to continue these receding edges, what they're called, far, far, far into the distance, it would look as if they would meet at a point in the distance. Now that point, or those points, are called vanishing points. So here's one more term that you will need to become familiar with before we dive in, and that term is your eye level. So your eye level, that's really easy. It's where your eye is in relationship to your box. So let's make an example visual. If I hold a box like this, it's on my eye level, right? My eyes are like at the same level as this edge here. If I drop this box low, see, I can start to see the top of it. Now the box is below my eye level because my eyes are here, we're looking out straight, and this is below my eye level. If I put this up here, like this, I can start to see the bottom. My eye level is still here, right? Straight. And then this is now above eye level. Why is that important? Here it comes, because my eye level gives me my horizon line. And those edges, when they're receding into the distance and they look like they're running together, which they do, they will meet, they will converge on the horizon line. Okay, so that was a lot. Now, I recommend you just let all of this wash over you. You draw along with me. And as I draw and as I explain this, it'll become more clear. And you might even want to watch this a second time if you're ready. Have you ever been to the gym the day before a big holiday, like the day before Thanksgiving or the day before Christmas, and you do like one of those group programs? Like the teacher, they will really let you have it on those days before the holidays. They really work you. So that's kind of my goal for you tonight. Not that you're going to, burn any calories, but I think it's fun to work hard every once in a while. So here we go. Let me transition. So now remember what I said about the questions, how we want to go through our questions to determine how to draw this thing. So I'm always beginning just with a placeholder, my gesture, just a blob, just to tell myself how big I want to draw on the page. And now, before I do any more drawing, I'm going to look at my reference and I'm asking myself, how many edges are parallel with my picture plane? So if you can see my cursor, I'm always answering that question with the closest thing to me. So the closest plane to me, which is right here and here, I'm always looking at those edges first. So here I have uprights that are parallel with my picture plane, and then my horizontals are parallel to the edge of my picture plane. So that tells me I should be dealing with this box in 1-point perspective. Okay, so I managed hurdle number 1. So hurdle number 1, let me move this down here if I can. 1, 4, 2 point. For most of these drawings tonight, I did 1 or 2 point. I threw in 1 3-point perspective box later on, but let's just keep it manageable. Question number 2, what's closest? And that's where I begin my drawing. So the plane that's closest, my first job is to figure out what that plane is like. So I have a fairly short, squat box. It's kind of broad. So my first job is to figure that one out. So how many times, for example, does this height fit into the width? That's what I'd be thinking about. And beginning with these verticals, that's really my big secret to figuring out perspective. Staying organized when I draw something in perspective. I begin with what's closest to me, and I make sure that my verticals are truly upright. Okay, so now that I have my nearest plane, I start to pay attention to how far back do I see the edge. Now, a lot of people, they get themselves into trouble by beginning to draw the receding edges. That's the last thing I draw, or one of the later things, not the very last thing, but it comes later in the process. First, I want to figure out how does this height relate to this distance. And the best way to do that is you close one eye. You close one eye and you let your eye hop from here to here and from here to the back. And you just make your best guess. You can literally measure with your hand if you wanted to, like on the screen, like see how many times this here fits into this here. I'm just gonna eyeball it. And once I have this, let's see, I figured out this first. Now I figured out this height in relationship to this height. Now I'm ready to finally address my receding edges. Now I am aware that this box is below my eye level. Why? Because I can see the top, right? The further below your eye level you go, the more of the top you'll see. The closer you get to, I'm going to scoot this over so you can see what I just drew over here. The closer I get to my eye level, the closer that box gets to my eye level, the smaller shape you'll see on top. So this is kind of in between, right? And the best way to gauge how to angle this is you hold up your pencil and you ask yourself, if this was the handle of a clock, what time would that be? You close one eye, you literally align that angle on the screen or on the house or whatever it is you're drawing. And then you draw that line longer than you need it. So you see how my hand, I'm not doing this. I'm keeping my wrist locked and I go shoo, shoo. I'm making long marks that kind of shoot off into the distance, further than you think you need it, much further than you think you need it. And then I do the same thing on the other side. I gauge on a clock, what time would this angle be? And then I shoot this angle off into the distance. And notice how they're meeting right here? That's your vanishing point. And you need that because any good perspective drawing doesn't just draw what we see. we also draw the hidden edges, meaning the edges that make contact with the surface. So remember, this is your horizon line, this is your eye level. This here is kind of describing the space between where your eye level is and the top of the box. So that's what I'm describing here. Things that happen easily is that when we draw these angles, we want to curve our line. So that's something to watch out for. And now what I do is I come back to the front of my box. And I'm going from here to my vanishing point. And no, I'm not using a ruler for this. This is freehand perspective. This is not about 100% accuracy. This is about viability. So you see, these are now the bottom edges touching the surface. Now remember how I said if we have a 1-point perspective box, the verticals and the horizontals are parallel to my imaginary picture frame. So now all I can do is I can go back to my back corner here and drop a vertical down. Do the same thing here. And I do my best, like I go to the edge of my paper and I bring a vertical in from that edge of the paper, making sure it's truly vertical, vertical, vertical. And if I can connect this and this back to the vanishing point, it delivers me my back bottom edge. And to make this visually clear, I darken everything that's closest to me. And I keep the stuff that's a little bit further away from me lighter. So this looks like a viable box. Is it exactly the box I'm seeing? Not quite. So now I would go through my roster of questions and ask myself, well, how is the box that I'm seeing in the picture different from the box that I drew? And hold on, I'm just getting confused real quick. Give me just a second here. Oh, I see what happened. I missed the switch. No wonder it's starting to look different. All right, it's because I was talking so much, huh? Okay, let's go back to this. Okay. Let me switch pages. And let me catch up on this one. All right, so same process. I begin with, let me just see where I'm at the time frame. So this, okay, so I have about 4 minutes for this one. Beginning with my blob, I'm running through my roster of questions. How many edges are parallel? So because I took this with a smartphone and I had a slight angle on it, it looks like the outer edges are pitching in. I'm going to treat it as if they're upright because it's going to make things easier. Later on, I will have one where I'll treat it like they're doing something different, like they're pitching in, but for now, let's keep it simple and treat it as a 1-point perspective box. So right now, I'm determining my closest plane. Remember, we're beginning with what's closest to us. Then, I don't begin with the receding edges yet. I gauge here to here, here to the back. So on this box, I'm seeing more of the top than on the earlier box. So I'm deciding what's the difference between this distance and this distance. Closing one eye is super helpful because it allows you just to see the shapes. And then I go for my angles, like what time would it be? And I make this much longer than I need it. I'm careful not to curve it. Keep it straight. And then the other one. So if you're watching this, if you're drawing with me, if you're still watching the recording, I'm super impressed. You're not shying away from the hard stuff. You're earning your stripes as a true draftsman or woman. Okay, so here I have now all the edges plotted out, all the planes plotted out that are visible. So then comes the true trick, which is plotting out the edges that are invisible. I'm going to zoom out a little bit so you can see my vanishing point. See how I continued this and this far enough so they actually meet. And I'm going to use this vanishing point to find my invisible edges. And what I do is I place my pencil here on the corner, but I place my eye where I want to go. And then I go with a straight mark. And I just do my best. Okay, then remember, because it's 1 point, verticals and horizontals are parallel to my frame. That means these back verticals are doing exactly the same thing as the front verticals. And then they won't match up perfectly in the back. So you just kind of do your best to make it viable. We're not after perfection, we're after viability and believability. And then you darken what's closest and keep what's further away lighter. And if I have time for the top box, I'll now get into the top box. Begin with my blob to place it. Start with my closest plane. It's just a little lighter here. Gauge what's the difference between the front plane and the top plane. Let's bring this to about here. And you just guess. And if this box is parallel with the bottom box, you can use the same vanishing point. I'm just using this vanishing point. And let's move on to the next box. It's truly like a workout tonight. So now let's go through our roster of questions that we want to consider. How many edges are parallel with your imaginary frame? Definitely not, if you're looking at the mouse, this is definitely not parallel anymore, right? It's at an angle. This isn't parallel anymore, this is at an angle. The only ones that are parallel with my picture plane, or that frame, are my verticals. I know there's a bit of distortion. It appears like they're pitching in, but I'm going to treat it as if they are upright. It makes it easier because now, if I only have one set of angles, one set of edges parallel, that means I use a 2-point perspective system. So where the hell do I start? Whatever's closest. So this here's the closest edge to me. I don't have a closest plane anymore. I only have a closest edge. So I begin with my closest edge. Make sure that's vertical. And now I'm gauging what's the relationship between left to right. And again, closing one eye is going to be really helpful for that. We can literally kind of take this distance, see how many times it fits into the other distance. And once you have this and you feel good about this left to right relationship, then you start to tackle your receding edges. And no, don't just start somewhere in the back and go crazy. You always, this is like the beauty, once you have a system, you begin with what's closest to you. So just how I began with my closest plane, I'm going to begin with my closest edge and the angles that come off of it. Okay, so again, on a clock face, this is 3 o'clock, maybe like 2:30-ish. And I make these longer than I need them, way longer. And over here, Again, if you can see, I am zoomed in too much, but I'm going really far away. Now do the bottom. So here, using that negative space is really useful to help you figure out how strongly to slant it. If you need a rule of thumb, the further below eye level you get, the stronger of a pitch you get. The closer to eye level you get, the more obtuse of an angle you get. So that's a good rule of thumb. Okay, so now if I feel like, okay, this is starting to get close, then comes the challenge of finding your back receding edges. And that's where it's really useful to color code your stuff. Like to have, let's say, orange for all the width lines, and then maybe, I don't have a different color, I should have had a different color, blue for all the depth lines, and then red for all the height lines. And you want to make sure that you have your angles that belong together all meet at their family meeting point. So if this is the family of the oranges and they're gonna head this way and their vanishing point is off screen somewhere over there, better make sure that the family member over here is heading in the same exact direction. And when the blues are meeting over on the left, you gotta make sure that they will meet their long lost cousin in the back as well. That's how I like to think about it. Then kind of coming back to this idea that verticals stay vertical, even if they're hidden in the back. You can drop this down, not really knowing quite yet how long it's going to go. But then you're going to use this. And like, oh, look at this. There's another family member, another orange family member. He's or she's heading to the same exact vanishing point somewhere over there. And so forth. Alrighty, let me change papers. So here we have an interesting scenario. I put the box, so it's not below eye level, but the eye level is running through the box. How do I know this? Because I can't see the top and I can't see the bottom, right? So let's break this down. And by the way, if you're thinking, well, easy for you, Carolyn, like you seem to love this shit and like you're just delighting in angles and stuff like that. It's like, no. I hated perspective for the longest time. It actually wasn't so much hate, it was more like being terrified of it because I didn't get it. I didn't understand it. And it took me having to teach it to others to really finally wrap my head around it. And once I kind of decoded it and I realized, oh, it's not that difficult actually, that's when I kind of found the ability to now verbalize it and explain it. Okay, so where do I start? I began by noticing what perspective system to use. So I'm noticing my verticals are upright, but this here is angled, and this here is angled, and this here is angled, and this here is angled. So that's pointing me at a 2-point system, a perspective, a vanishing point over here, and a vanishing point on the other side. And so where do I begin? Always in the front, always with my closest edge. I figure out my left to right relationship. Again, closing one eye. And actually taking this distance, seeing how many times it fits into here is really useful. I'm going to skip that part because today's not about proportions. I do want to erase some stuff, just so I don't have a million lines here. Okay, so now I'm going to make my best educated guess about where my eye level is, my horizon line. So I'm using eye level and horizon line interchangeably. So I'm just guessing that's here. Might be a little bit different, but that's what I'm guessing. And wherever I feel like I have the better shot at guessing the receding edge angle, that's where I begin. Of course, starting at my front edge. So I feel like I can see this one pretty well, so I'm going to try here. And I should zoom out more so you can see me heading off into the distance. This can be even flatter. And this angle, I'm looking at the white shape, so rather than looking at the edge of the present, I mean, of course I'm looking at the edge of the present, but I'm mainly trying to see the shape created by the white table. So this is my guess for where that angle is going. I do the same thing at the top. And now, right now, you see how light my lines are? They're not, I'm not engraving them yet on the page. I'm keeping them erasable because I don't know yet, right? So now if I'm comparing these two, they should meet at the same vanishing point. Right now they're not, so I'm gonna adjust it until they do. I like this angle, I feel like that is good, so I'm gonna fan that one out a little bit more like this. See, so now I have my vanishing point somewhere around about here. And again, it doesn't have to be perfect, it doesn't have to be 100% accurate, it just has to be believable. So this here's a very flat angle here, so that goes far, far off the page. So these here on the left side, they're heading far off to the left, not even on the drawing board anymore. And then I do the same thing. Remember the whole color coding to make them all part of their family? So you have your height, you have a depth, and then you have a width line. You assign colors, and then you'd find the corresponding family members. And I know the image has changed. I'm just gonna complete this one. I see. So now this is my best guess at the box we have in front of us. Okay, new box, new luck. So what perspective system do you think we'll need for this one? So think about your imaginary frame that you're looking through. How many sets of edges are parallel? And the answer is only one set of edges is parallel, so that results in a 2-point perspective box. We're seeing the top of the box, so our eye level is somewhere above. Where do I begin? I begin with my closest vertical. And then I figure out my relationship between my verticals, left to middle, middle to right. Now again, it's not that artists just love drawing boxes because boxes themselves are just so great. It's a tool, just how you, and I know I use a ton of gym analogies, but it's useful to think through that frame. If you want to strengthen your abs, you do sit-ups or do plank pose or whatnot, you know? If you want to get better at describing things realistically in space, you want them to feel like they live in a world that is bound by the same rules that your world is bound by, you have to understand how to translate perspective. So if you want to draw a car, you got to understand how to draw a box. If you want to draw a house, you got to understand how to draw a box. If you want to draw a cow, you got to understand how to draw a box. Okay, so I plotted out my best guess for the bottom angles. I'm guessing my eye level. I can try using my same horizon line from the previous drawing. See where that leads, so I need to bring this up. So here's a vanishing point there. Now, you noticed probably that there's a peak. It's not a normal box. So how do I deal with that? I pretend like I'm drawing the enclosing box first, and then I carve out the peak. That's the way you want to go. You go biggest to smaller and smaller and smaller. So I'm guessing this is how high it would be. You can actually measure it if you wanted to. How many times does this fit into this? You aim these at the same vanishing point. They go together. And this goes over here. Now, if you have questions as I'm drawing, please feel free to put anything in the chat. So again, this is where I'm going through the exercise in my mind of grouping. So this, and this, let's call them our depth edges. They're all heading towards their vanishing point up here. They're the D vanishing point. Now let's call these edges here our width edges. This is a width edge. This is a width edge. Down here, that would be a width edge. They all need to go and converge at the same vanishing point over there. And this one would be another depth. One, and then of course we have our H lines, the height lines. Now, if you had to break down perspective into its simplest version, all you want to take away from tonight is that whatever is closer to you should be bigger. Whatever is further away from you should be smaller. So you see right now this here appears bigger than what I did here. So I'm not quite there yet. But I'm going to keep moving. I'm going to keep moving. I want to get to the peak. I want to show you a little trick. So if you have a house and it has a peak, you want to figure out how to draw that peak. You first draw the enclosing plane, and then you exit out, and then you drive a vertical through that X. And where that vertical that you kind of drove through your intersection meets, that's where you can bring. Let me just go back because I want to finish this so you can see what I mean. You can bring a peak here. Now you can't just draw this randomly down. It's not going to work. So you decide, okay, I like this angle. This seems like what it looks like. You can use your clock arm trick for that. But then you need to go from here, drive that to your vanishing point, your width vanishing point, and then see where that intersects. Now you know where to bring that thing. So you have to construct stuff like that. So from here, then you'd go over to this vanishing point, right? The one that belongs to the depth, because this depth is describing your D. You can go from here to the depth. And then you can connect those two. See, so now I have this little house-like box. And if you want to critique this drawing, which I would, you know, if this was about accuracy, I would critique this drawing and say I didn't capture the relationship between the height and the width quite right. Mine is narrower than the box that I saw in the image. But again, that's something I'm letting go of tonight. All right, so let's try another one. Are you sweating yet? Are you having fun yet? Or am I the only one drawing? Has everybody left? Okay, so we have 7 minutes. Question number 1. I'm beginning with a big package. Do I need 1-point perspective or 2-point perspective system? Go through my edge check. Parallel, right? Parallel with the horizontals, parallel with the verticals. All right, cool. We have a 1-point perspective box. We can handle 1-point perspective. That's pretty easy. What do I begin with? The closest plane. Make sure I position my board just so everything looks parallel to your screen. My camera's a little bit at an angle, so make sure it looks awesome, Nacha. So glad you're having fun. And it's not just me geeking out over here all by myself, which, you know, I'd be happy with that. Okay, so now I have my front plane, and now I'm checking, okay, how many times would that fit into the height? You can be very careful about it, or you can just eyeball it. Closing one eye is a really useful trick. I also like extending my edges beyond my actual shape and then gauging between here and here. Okay, so then that feels good enough. It might be off a little bit, but it's easy to move that edge back. So now that I have my closest edge, I'm gonna go for the receding edges, and I always begin with what's easiest. Where do you have the best shot at being accurate? Don't set yourself up for failure, set yourself up for success by going for the things that you think you can handle. Again, careful not to curl. Careful not to curve your angles here. And this is very, very steep. So again, I'm locking my wrist when I go up. And the struggle is real with kind of bending your lines. I don't know why we want to do that. I think again it has to do with the arc that is created. Chris, your brain is sweating. Oh my goodness. you can wring it out after class with I don't know, a margarita or something. I don't know what you can wring your brain out with. Okay, so I've got my 2 receding edges, which delivered me to my vanishing point, got delivered to a vanishing point. So now we can use that vanishing point to find the invisible edges. And as I said, whenever you're learning something complex, like whenever you're studying anatomy, whenever you're studying perspective, anything that's hyper-technical, you need to give yourself some grace and acknowledge that it's going to take a couple of goes for you to fully absorb the information. So come back to this lesson another time whenever you're ready to sweat again. So I made my best guess for my bottom edges. Now to find, again, the trick is finding those invisible edges, right? So that's where I fall back to my understanding of, well, if it's 1 point, all the verticals are actually parallel to each other. So find my corner, and just drop it down vertically, making sure that this is parallel with this. And the best way to check that is to actually use your pencil kind of find, I'll show you if I can, find the edge of your paper, because that's, you know, an upright vertical, and make sure that your vertical here is parallel to the edge of your paper, or parallel to the edge of your drawing board or of your sketchbook. And like that, you don't end up with these leaning boxes. Okay, so I got the perspective figured out, and I'm gonna darken everything that's close to me. And keep stuff that's further away from me light. So now I would check one more time. How do I feel about this box? Is that this kind of box, or does it look different? And right now I feel like, well, actually my first guess was probably more accurate. So I'm gonna bring this in and make it less deep. But I see now, once I have my vanishing points plotted out, that adjustment is a really quick adjustment. It's not a big deal. So I'm basically just sliding that plane forward along the tracks that I've built. It's no accident that most artists, when they teach perspective, they'll talk about train tracks a lot. So if you ever take my perspective workshop, there's lots of train track examples. Okay, so now, because I don't know how much time I've left for this drawing, there's a second box, and that one is different. You see how that one is positioned differently? So we need a different system for that one. So yet another, oh man. the takeaway that I was going to give you is that every box gets its own perspective system, unless they're parallel with each other. Well, let's see, maybe on this one we'll get through the whole set of both boxes, and you'll see how that shakes out. Let's put the big box here, let's put this tall, narrow one here. So these are all the presents I got from my daughter. So luckily she's not on YouTube yet, unless I am holding the phone in my hand. But yeah, these are all the presents that Christkind is going to bring. So we don't do Santa because I'm German, as you know. We do Christkind. It's like this baby Jesus angel blend. Okay, so this box, as you have probably noticed, see there's an angle here, there's an angle here. It's not parallel with the horizontals, but your verticals are sure parallel with your frame. So we need a 2-point system for this box. What do you think, what kind of system we need for this taller box? Smells different to me. This box smells different than this box, doesn't it? So let's see. Let's begin here with our closest edge. Let's figure out how the left side relates to the right side. We always pretend like we can see through stuff. Like just because this little box here is blocking very rudely our view, doesn't matter. We're artists, we can imagine where would the edge be. Continuing my edges far, far off. And see, my temptation is I want to go back here and then kind of continue back here. But I first want to make sure I get my forward-facing planes, like these, like if you think about it as a paper strip. First I want to make sure I get this paper strip figured out that's facing me, and then I get to the back edges. So I'm double checking this angle here. Oh, this is, I think, much more upright. So again, the more I pitch this angle, the more it'll read like it's below my eye level. The more I open it up, the more flatter I make it, the more it'll look like I'm really close to my eye level. I'm not very happy with these angles yet, so I'm right now chewing on that. Oh, I was right what I had before, I think. Let's go with this one here. I like that one better. So when I do these kind of technical drawings, I approach it like an experiment. Let me test this one, but not an experiment where all things are variable, because that would be chaotic. That would be so disorienting, right? It's an experiment where certain things stay stable, like my verticals. They're going to stay stable. They're going to stay always upright. And then I check, do I want it to be this angled or even more or even less? So that gives me my eye level up here. And these run off. Okay, so let's shoot this over here. So remember your families, your edge families. So this is my depth family here. All my D's, they're all heading to their D vanishing point over here. And then here we have our W's. They're all running over to their party. They're having their holiday party over on the right-hand side. And then we gotta find the shy family members, the ones that really don't want to go to the family hangout. Or the introverts. Maybe they do want to go, but they're just introverted. And that's why they're a little bit harder to see. Okay, so this box, complete. Is it perfect? No. How would I improve it? I would probably start to shorten this distance. I feel like it has gotten too deep. So whenever you make your first guess, and then you look at the results, and then you stay level-headed. You don't start freaking out over, oh my God, it's all wrong. You go through a roster of questions, and those questions would be, well, is something wrong with the depth to height to width relationship? Or do I see not enough of the top? Do I need to see more of the top? If that's the answer, then you have to address the width of this angle here. Okay. So this little silvery present guy here, that's a one point box. Did you guess it? Because both the horizontals, width and height lines, are parallel with our horizontal frame and our vertical frame edges. And I didn't get to it again. But let me back up. We have a little bit extra time because I had fewer boxes than usual, fewer references than usual. What I wanted to say earlier, every box gets its own perspective system. So here I used 2 point for this box. This box, because it's not parallel with this box, I wasn't being an organization freak with how I placed them. I just placed them naturally. So see, this one gets now its own perspective system. still gonna go to the same eye level, like the vanishing points. They're still gonna fall on the same eye level. That stays consistent. But those vanishing points are not being shared by this box. So every box has its own set of vanishing points. The only thing that we need to make sure is that those vanishing points fall on that same eye level. Does that make sense? Okay, let's move on to that last image. The big pile. There it is. You ready? And again, you can just draw along with exactly the box that I draw, or you can pick one that seems most interesting to you. So I'll warn you that this box with the white bow, that's a 3-point perspective bow. I'll try and get to it so you've seen me address 3-point perspective. Let me just scoot this over and make it a little bit smaller so everything is in the frame. There we go. And I'm gonna sharpen my pencil so you're gonna hear a loud, weird sound. Okay, so here we go. Let me move this. So here you see all 3 perspective systems represented. You have 2-point on the left, and okay, so I adjusted it by now. Bill, I hope it's better now that I made the frame better. Oh yeah, awesome, great. There's a little bit of lag, so I'm glad it worked out. So the box on the left is 2-point. The small box in the middle is 3-point. And then this one over here looks like a 1-point box, right? So again, last recap, so you're really clear on how I come to this conclusion. If I say that I walk through life with an imaginary frame, and it's a rectangular frame, then on this box I have the width lines parallel with these here. I have my height lines parallel with these here. So whenever you have 2 sets, it gives you a 1-point system. Here, we only have the height edges parallel with our verticals from the frame. And here, nothing is parallel. This is when all hell breaks loose. Not really, but okay. So let's begin by the closest edge. I'm beginning with my left to right relationship. And again, I'm pretending like I can see through the boxes, even though it's being covered up. And I'm again trying, by closing one eye, imagining where the back edge would be, how far would that be in relationship to that. You do your best, and then you move on. And so here I'm beginning by finding this angle. I'm looking at this negative space here. I'm always coming off of my closest edge. Use that clock handle analogy to find these angles and make sure that I don't curve these edges. Okay, so now I'm already noticing I either made this too tall or I made this too narrow. Let's go with making this wider. So sometimes you can tell those things right away. That feels better to me. extend these far enough so they actually create a vanishing point. Sometimes your vanishing point is off on your drawing board, sometimes it's not even on your drawing board. But if you can get it on the page, it's a good thing to have. Because you don't want them to look parallel. Like if they're parallel, then you're not drawing your thing in perspective. From this back corner, again, I'm going through my little analogy of like who is this one family with? Who does this one belong to? So he or it is part of my depth edges, and the depths they're hanging out over here. Okay, I'll drop this down. This one goes over here. There's another depth family member. And to double check again, whatever is closest to you, like this plane is closer to me than this plane, it should look bigger. So right now, not quite there yet, so I would keep tinkering with that until it does. So if I was concerned with proportions, I would probably still work on this becoming wider. But I want to get to that 3-point box because I said I would. So when you have a 3-point perspective box, again, I would begin with whatever is closest to you. So what used to be a vertical, this little height line here, is now an angle and is also curvy because, you know, it's not perfectly machined. It's this wrapping paper, it buckled. So I'm just doing my best to determine this closest angle to me. So, and then I focus on my closest corner. So remember here, closest edge. On the 1-point box, it's the closest face. On the 3-point box, it's the closest corner. And you try your best to dial in those 3 lines. What is this angle in comparison to this angle in comparison to this angle? And again, it's trial and error for me. Maybe there's some other smart artists out there who have a much more technical system to get to the answers, but this is what I do. And so once I have my front corner with the edges coming off of it, I can then drive them towards each other. And of course, we want to be careful with how much we slant them in. The more you slant them in, the more extreme you make your perspective. So you've all seen this in these comic hero movies. They want to imply how Superman is flying over the city. You're going to get that extreme 3-point perspective. The houses are going to look like they're becoming these little cones. Okay, so we're wrapping up with the last few seconds. So again, just like with earlier, you gotta be really clear on your families, and that's the color coding trick. So all your width lines, they need to drive at one vanishing point. All your height lines, they'll want to drive a vanishing point. And the longer you make your lines, the more you'll actually see if you're succeeding. And then your depth lines. See, and these should come together too. And then it doesn't have to be perfect, but whatever's closest to you should look bigger than what's further away. And if that's not holding up, then you definitely need to make a correction. So I'm going to just quickly sketch in your 1 point box, and then we're done. The timer on the images is already off. I didn't put an end screen image on. So here I'm beginning with my face, the plane of the box that's closest to me. I begin where I can get a sense for the receding edge. Guesstimating the depth here. Make sure that this here goes to the same vanishing point as these guys are. All right, and now it's just getting to become a big mess of lines. So if it is about clarity, you know, if you feel like, oh my gosh, I'm getting lost in all the lines, that's when you grab your eraser and you start to take out the lines that belong to things that are far away, or that are just kind of construction lines. And you start to edit a little bit. So we do want to be clear. Okay, so this is my best shot at this present pile, and hopefully this gave you a good introduction to the craziness that is perspective, but hopefully, I'm going to transition out of here. Hopefully it also showed you that it is manageable. So again, it's very likely that your brain tied itself into knots at one point in the evening, and that's fine. But do come back to this lesson, re-watch it whenever you're ready for it, and notice the system that I'm following. I'm going to repeat it one more time. We pretend that we have this frame that's walking with us, and if our line of sight changes, that frame changes up with us. That line of sight is our eye level, right? And wherever that falls, let's say you have a laser beam and that laser beam lands on the wall, that's where the horizon line would be. And we need the horizon line because that's where our vanishing points will sit, right? You can't have a vanishing point that's kind of above or below your horizon line. With that kind of as your backdrop, this is the perspective game. In the perspective game, those are the rules. You have that frame that you're walking with, you have that eye level, etc. Then you start to address the actual boxes. And every box, listen, this is a one takeaway I want you to have. Every box has its own perspective system, has its own set of vanishing points. Okay, so if you have a box where both the height and the width lines are parallel with your imaginary frame, you choose a 1 point system. If only the verticals, only those height edges are parallel with your imaginary frame, you choose 2 point perspective system, which will result in 2 vanishing points. And if nothing is parallel with your imaginary frame, you'll have to establish 3 vanishing points and use a 3 point system. If all else fails, you always come back to whatever's closest to me must appear bigger. Whatever is further away from me must appear smaller. And when you start to draw your boxes, you always begin with the edge, the plane, or the corner that is closest to you. And then you go off of that corner, off of that edge, off of that plane. And it takes a while, and it's totally worth it. So whenever we get back to animals, I do want to do a session where we focus on quadrupeds, and I want to show you how understanding the box is going to be so good in making your quadrupeds more believable in space. So I hope you got something out of tonight. I'm sending you off with this very challenging lesson into the end of the year. This is going to be the last sketch session for this year. I'm taking a brief break, and I'm looking forward to drawing with you in the fresh new year again. If you have any requests of what to cover in the next sessions, please send them my way. Please tag me in any Instagram posts in your sketches over the break at Pura Studios. I'd love to see your stuff. I'd love to keep cheering you on and stay in the loop with what's happening with you. And if you're not on my email list, you gotta get your butt onto my email list, because that's where you find out about anything new class-wise or sketch session-wise that's coming down the pipes, and you don't want to miss it. You get special treatment if you're on my email list, and you get fun emails too. So with that, have a great rest of the year. I'm so happy that we've been getting to draw together so much, and I can't wait to do it soon again. Take care.